This weekend I'm working on my Bear in the Log Cabin quilt. I think I showed you some little pieces of it before, so when I was piecing together the actual log cabins, and then I did a tutorial on how to make flying geese, which was making the roofs for it, and I've made 36 blocks, and now I just need to piece them all together in the top. So it's 5 PM on Saturday when I'm filming this. I've got the rest of this evening and some time tomorrow to put it together as well, so hopefully I'll get that done. I have pieced 2 of the 6 columns that it's made up of, and what I tend to do is to piece the columns together as I go as well. So this is where I've had to change how I normally work. So a lot of people who watch this will be the same as me. You'll be the rebels that don't use pins, and that was working out well until I came to piece the really long piece of sashing that I've got. So the way that this is organised is I have 6 blocks with a tiny little piece of sashing on them. On each column will alternate whether it's got a little piece of sashing on the top of the block or the bottom, just to kind of give it a wavy kind of effect. But when I piece them together I don't want the houses touching, so I needed to put a little strip that's only 1.5 inches in between. So that is what this will look like. But I started sewing it, and then I found that one side of the sashing was much longer than the other, so I had to unpick it all and to pin it. So sometimes we have to pin. So this is kind of what it's looking like at the moment. I haven't finished piecing this seam yet, so hopefully you can see that. So as I mentioned before, I've got one side where you've got the sashing at the bottom, one side where the sashing is at the top, and then there's this little strip in between. So it should finish up at around 81 inches by 53 inches. Here's a little close-up as well of some of the blocks that I have in there. So these were made mostly with brown scraps because I have so many brown scraps. That's from making my pictorial quilts with the different animals, and most animals are brown. I've got some where I've got a piece of fusible bias binding to make like a window pane. Some of them where the prints are so big that I haven't done that, but all of them are made up from the same fabrics around the outside, making the log cabin effect, and then scrappy roofs and white Kona. There's another dog barking outside. I also wanted to show you how I use thread in this machine. So this is just a straight stitch machine. It doesn't have zigzag or anything fancy on there. It literally is just like an industrial style machine made out of metal. Does a decent straight stitch, which is what I bought it for. If I need to do any extra decorative stitches or zigzag applique, for example, satin stitch, attaching buttons, that kind of thing, I do it on my cheap Walmart machine that I have. So I don't use that very often, so I don't really need a decent machine for that, and it seems to do the job. But this machine, I have had a little trouble using the pins that are on the top here, just because they don't seem very long to hold thread down on. They just don't seem very adequate. What I actually use here is Wonderful Confetti, which is a 50 weight cotton, and I have that on a cone stand. The cone stand cost me something like 18 bucks. The thread is, I think it's around 25 a cone, and this is my very first cone of it. I bought another one of it today because I felt like I was running a little bit short, but there's 2,500 yards of thread on there, so I've made about 4 or 5 quilts already, and I've still got some left. So what I do is I use the cone of thread. It comes up through this hook here, and then up through the first hook on the machine, and then I just thread it like it says in the instruction manual. So that kind of thread works really well for me. Never had a problem with breakages or anything like that. And I also use it in the bobbin too. When I have to use pins, I tend to sort of sew over them slowly. I know a lot of people don't like to do that. I'll just show you how it works for my machine. These pins are quite flat ones. They're flower head pins. They lie nice and flat, and then I put them at a 90-degree angle to where the stitching is going to go, and you can see where I had to rip those stitches out because you can see where I'm going to sew next. This little purple thing, that is just a guide that sticks to my machine so I know where my 1/4 inch seam is. I think they're called the Sewing Edge, and they're made by, or at least distributed by C&T, the book publishers. So I'm just going to show you how this works. This machine can go much faster. I don't really want it to go faster when I'm sewing with pins. And I don't know whether you can see that. We've gone right over the pin, no clunking, nothing. So I can just take it out now and we're all good. I have bent a couple of pins in the past, but it's very rare that that happens. And here's what it looks like with that long seam piece. All fits together now. Yay! Once I've put the top together, I'm going to piece the back. And I've had this in my stash for a while. I was going to make like a cardigan, kind of very without buttons, kind of loose shawl-y thing, and then I wasn't sure whether it would look really sort of gross and old-fashioned and just wrong. I thought in my head it might look cool, but yeah, I started to have second thoughts. So I have this. However, firstly it's flannel, so I don't use flannel. I just flat out don't use flannel. So this will be the first time I'll be sewing with this, and I thought it'd be quite nice for the back, and it coordinates really nicely with the fabrics I have. It means I don't have to go out and buy any other fabric. I saw a really nice print that Hawthorne Threads had designed, one of their in-house designs with bears on it. I think it's from a range called Redwood, and I really wanted to buy that, but by the time I bought enough, because of the weird width of this quilt, it would turn out to be about $80 Canadian, and I didn't want to spend that extra money. So I have this from my stash. It's about the size of the quilt, so as we all know, we need a little bit more backing than the actual top, so that you can layer it successfully as a sandwich. So I'm going to have to piece in a strip just to play it safe. The edges are probably going to be a little bit close still on the width, but on the length I am going to add this little strip that I bought today from my sewing room. I've cut it in half, so it's 1/3 of a metre cut in half, and I'm going to piece it end to end, and that will give me about another 6.5 inches, maybe closer to 6 inches actually, because it is only 1/3 of a metre. Next is batting. I am a big fan of this is really not very interesting to look at. I'm a big fan of Hobbs 80-20 blend. It's affordable, it's not as expensive as 100% cotton, and it has a bit more loft to it, and it's really nice to quilt. I find it washes better than cotton too. It doesn't shrink as unevenly. It's sort of, if it shrinks at all, which I find it doesn't really shrink very much anyway, it does it very evenly, so you don't end up with weird corners that are kind of no longer straight when you've washed it, because I tend to wash all my quilts after I've bound them. So I don't pre-wash my fabrics, I don't pre-wash my batting, I don't pre-wash my backing. I make it all from unwashed fabrics, and then I stick it in the washing machine with some colour catchers and cross my fingers, and it always works out with the Hobbs batting. Lastly, I have the binding. Now, a lot of my quilts I do invisible binding. On this one I'm just going to do a straightforward visible binding. I probably will end up machining it on because I'll get bored of the process and I'll want to see it finished. So this is a half price fabric that I got also from my sewing room in the discount section, for where they put the fabrics that they've had in stock for a long time and they want to shift them. At the back of the store they put all of those bolts on a rack and they're 50% off. It's called Manja Manja by Stephanie Marrett, and it's for Wilmington, so it's not really a place I have a lot of prints from, and the rest of the line were kind of chefy kind of fabrics, so not really my thing at all. But this stripe I thought was really versatile, and I love a straight binding. If I put a visible binding on a quilt, it's always a striped one, or very frequently a striped one. So I'm going to make sure I cut it this way so those little stripes are running into the quilt. Tune in next week. I have no idea what I'll be up to, hopefully bag making. I have to pitch some classes this week, so maybe I will have some class samples, hopefully, maybe, if I get my act together and the postman brings me all of the bits I'm waiting for. Also, I want to say the video before this, I have put a little post up about a giveaway, so I'm hoping that you will subscribe to my channel to keep up to date with my regular vlogs, and if they're not of interest, don't worry, I'm also posting regular tutorials. There are 2 currently on there, but there are plans for lots more. As I sew various things, I tend to think, hey, you know what, people might need to know a little tip about this, or maybe I need to explain the process completely from start to finish, so I'm putting together quick videos on there too, so hopefully you'll find those useful. So if you think that might be for you and you've liked what you've seen so far, if you subscribe, once I get to 200 subscribers, I'm going to give away a prize of either a jelly roll, a layer cake, or 3 charm packs, and you can choose what your prize is. If you want to know more about that, go into my channel, see the introductory video. If you're not already a subscriber, that will be the intro video that you'll see on there, and it will explain and show you the prizes that you can win.